Do you know why the self-help, the business books, the consultant industry, the anecdotal books, and even the social science findings about leadership are just all over the place? It's just a total mess with people making up new concepts, new neologisms, new words, new phrases, new jargon. And there are scandals everywhere, and there is mess. Well, I will tell you why. The reason is that leadership is a branch of ethics, which is a branch of philosophy. And what I mean by that is what you're trying to do in leadership, the definition is trying to get a group to accomplish a goal. But what goal and what are the permittable means to get there and what's not allowed, what's unethical? So you have people say the way to resolve this is to figure out your values and to put those on a plaque on the wall. And then you live authentically, as an authentic leader or a servant leader, and you try to live out those values. Jeffrey Pfeffer, who's a Stanford business professor, in his book Leadership BS, says that it's all over the place, the leadership industry. And so he said he worries about the sincere people who fall for this idea of doing the right thing, keeping these values, that sort of thing, because he says there are tigers out there. There are people who their only ethic is not getting caught breaking a law. And therefore, you're naive. You may get eaten if you are not smart about navigating the tough world of war, politics, business, sports. You have got to be wary. And it does not help you, he says, to be that naive about, this plaque with the values on it. And again, there is a real reason why there is this confusion. And that is that leaders typically don't think of themselves as these moral sage, these contemplative, mystics or who are reflecting about the values of the world in some monk or something like that. They are doers, right? So ready, action, set. They're just not even waiting, ready, set, action. They're just acting and they're trying to get things done. And again, they're just reflecting in their actions the broader confusion about what is the right end, what is the right means that is in a pluralist society. It's totally normal to have different competing presuppositions, assumptions about what is right. And Alasdair MacIntyre wrote about this. He was at Notre Dame, philosopher, and he says, there seems to be no rational way of securing moral agreement in our culture. And then he also says, there are just too many alternative ways to begin. That's where we're at. No wonder people don't have a common starting point. That's fine. It's sort of a religious thing to know where you should start with, like a religious conviction deep down somewhere about what is the lowest or base foundational thing you believe in. So that's understandable. So what happens? All right, religious people, I think about the coach, the football coach, who's a Christian, and he ends up imposing his religion, maybe prayer before the game or prayer after the game, that sort of thing, on his players. He's modeling it. And a lot of other leaders, too, who are great business leaders, and some of them write these books about how to lead. And they call all of these like Christian principles more neutral things, right? That just sound humanist or secular, but are, kind of based on their moral framework of Christianity, right? So again, the really religious leaders kind of lead with those values, and it's either really out there and they don't hide it, or it's kind of disguised and it's implicit, it's kind of hidden in the values. Again, people become then cynical of both, right? They become annoyed by the religious leader who is really imposing it on people explicitly. They're also smell that there's something rotten, there's something sketchy about these values. Where do they come from? So the secular person, atheist person, whatever, wonders where these values came from. And they rightly do, because often they are from Christianity or something like that. There isn't this head-to-head argument between Nietzsche, who says survival of the fittest, everything is meaningless, nihilistic, don't be compassionate, help yourself, versus the compassionate Christianity, help the weak, help the poor, even if it costs you. There is not that kind of clear contrast of values in a meeting where the business people are trying to figure out what are our company values, right? Or what are our team values, that kind of thing. All right, so, and what do the secular people tend to do? Well, they agree on some very basic things with the religious people. Maybe not killing people or something like that, but even in war, politicians and generals don't even have those scruples, right? So there really is not a lot that people agree about. But in the West, in Europe and the United States, actually a lot of people lead with quasi-Christian beliefs that they inherited from the culture, in the water, from their growing up, from their grandparents, their parents. Now, a secular person doesn't feel strongly maybe about the foundations of those, but they believe those values, those ethics, those moral things are inherent, or human rights, that sort of thing. But as historian Tom Holland has shown, who's not a Christian necessarily, I'm not sure what he calls himself right now, but he says in studying Islam, in studying the pagan world, the Greco-Roman world, he became convinced, I'm quite Christian in my moral convictions. And so, yes, I would say that would be the case for a lot of people in the West, that they actually hold a quasi-Christian point of view, and that those things that they think are kind of obvious or humanist or inherent, those are actually not so inherent to everybody globally. Those are actually, or in all religions or something like that, those are actually very influenced by Christianity. So what to say about that? One, I would just want them to realize that they too probably have a pretty shaky foundation for their moral beliefs. And the problem with theirs is that they don't really feel them strongly. And so oftentimes that makes them susceptible to making exceptions for themselves if it's convenient. So that's just one of the tricky, bad, weak parts about kind of having a hodgepodge religion or philosophy or moral values, is that you tend to break those things when they're convenient. It gets you in trouble, destroys yourself, destroys other people. So what I would just recommend is just realizing that leadership involves ethics, and therefore what I would recommend is to find a tradition. Islam, Confucianism, Hinduism, Buddhism. I'd recommend Christianity. I think Jesus is great. I think you'd really like him. And so I would go for that. When we go to church, we're every week really trying to think morally and to grow morally, how to think through all these issues, so that when the complications of life come up, then we are ready to address them. So that's what I would recommend. Pick a tradition, and that will help you in your leadership if you're coming from a moral tradition.